So, hello and welcome to Inspiring Interviews, Conversations about Breath, where each week I interview a well-known breath worker or facilitator about their journey of how they stepped into being a really amazing, life-changing person. Now, today I'm really lucky to be joined by Drew Gerald, who isn't a breath worker, but has the most extraordinary presence and process that he brings people through to help them realize and step into their own greatness. So let's bring him in. Hi, Drew. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Thanks
Should
for
we
having me,
just start
Benedict.
off by taking a breath together?
Yes.
Okay, I feel like I'm properly here now. So in these interviews, I started them up because I want to inspire people. I want to inspire people about breath work, but breath work is just a tool really that we use to step into our greatness, to find our power, to step into our sovereignty, to clear energy blocks, to heal trauma, to really transform our lives. So it isn't just about breath work. There are other things that people do, such as what you do. Now, for me, the most inspiring things for me is hearing people's stories. And I don't just mean the glossy shopfront advert kind of things that people put in their bios on their websites. I mean the challenges and the struggles and the deeper and the darker nights of the soul that people have gone through, because no one steps into their power without going through those moments. So in this interview, we're going to look through your life and your journey into greatness, and we'll step right back through the beginning. We'll take some breaths with some of your teachers and some of your mentors along the way, and we'll find out what inspired you and what you really want to inspire in others. So how does that sound to you, Drew?
Sounds fantastic. Let's do it.
Okay, well, what I do before I do an interview, I ask people to send me a little bio or something that they would like read out. And usually that is the glossy shopfront advert version of themselves. So I'm going to read your glossy shopfront version.
Oh, fun.
How does that sound?
Good. I hope it's glossy enough.
It is. Well, I've got a couple. So I've got the bio that you sent me, which is Drew Gerald has been helping professionals the world over see elusive patterns that kept them from realizing true fulfillment and self-actualization for over 10 years. Using advanced movement diagnostics, intuition development, and cinematic technology, his consciousness training helps accelerate your hero's journey with tangible material and spiritual results.
Okay, that sounds great.
And then I looked on your website and looked at your bio on there, and that also tells a really amazing story. And when I read that, I was thinking, wow, this guy's been like a child prodigy almost. So I'm going to read that one out as well. So, Drew, this is from your website, drewgerald.com. At 14, my cousin introduced me to GeoCities and thus began my design career. Every logo, every graphic, every website, every piece of copy, line of code, article, trailer, and video, he has created himself. By 18, I started a successful software company around a physics and particle engine that I developed. This, along with an engineering software licensing platform and also open source code, served Fortune 500 clients such as Disney, Samsung, Sony Pictures, Whole Foods, BT, Walmart, Discovery, Square Enix, Turner, Acura, and over 30,000 others. And I recently contributed software for Amazon's Alexa and WordPress. Beginning my path of entrepreneurship, I moved to LA and immersed myself in personal development. At 21, I was board certified as a trainer and master practitioner of NLP, hypnotherapy, coaching, Reiki, and others. In 2010, I started a successful blog on personal development for men, writing articles and reaching over 1 million views and began coaching clients. In 2013, I created a course around my approach to spirituality and sex called Holistic Sex, published by Mind Valley, alongside spiritual leaders such as Eckhart Tolle, Abraham Hicks, David Dada, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Bob Proctor, and Ken Wilber. And after a few years of teaching holistic sexuality, I had a wake-up call, left LA, and began my current work in New York, and now also in Europe.
That's pretty glossy.
It is pretty glossy. It is, it's a great bio that you've got there. How does it feel having that read back to you?
It's interesting. That's the first time that somebody's ever read it back to me. You know, people have said things to other people, like, you know, in workshops or whatever, but that's the first time, like, one-on-one, somebody's like, let me read this to you. Yeah, it felt a little vulnerable. I felt a little vulnerable. It felt, as you read it, I was like, wow, like that's, you know, that sounds pretty glossy as you said it. I had the thoughts of that, of, yeah, that's, you know, that's the highlight reel. There's a lot of stuff that I tell in my story, because on the website too, I also have my story of what it took to achieve all of that stuff.
Well,
But it felt good. It was 20, you know, about 20 years of working my ass off, and, you know, making great sacrifices and struggles to achieve all that. And yeah, I'm very proud of the work that I've done, and all of the people that I've been able to help and serve. And yeah.
okay. Well, I mean, it sounds great, you know, and I loved reading that out, by the way. You've got a really good bio. Not everyone has such a glossy spread. But I think I'm going to do two things now. First of all, I'm going to give you a minute, just 1 minute. Just give me some of the details about you in your life now, where you live, what you do, what your life looks like. You know, any details, you've got a minute. And then after that, I'm going to invite you to tell in a minute, maybe not some of the glossy details, but maybe some of the darker details, maybe some of the things that you don't put in your detail. How does that sit with you?
Great, perfect.
Okay, so give us the Drew Gerald 101 starting now.
Well, so right now, in the past week, I've launched the Center for Somatic Development, which has been the culmination of everything that you've just read. And I've spent the past 3 months editing video, doing websites. Like I said in there, I have a background in design and web development, so I've been spending a lot of time on the computer working. And I'm very proud of my new project. And it's going to set the foundation for future decades of the work that I do in the world. I'm currently in Italy, so I've had the past 3 months of isolation, quarantine, and lockdown to be working on that. My flights to the US have been canceled. I've kind of been stuck over here, but I've done the best that I could to keep moving forward and creating and doing online events. Is that a minute? Should I keep going? Oh, you're muted. I lost you.
I was just about to give you a 5-second warning there as well.
5-second warning. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
The lockdown in Italy, you've been working very hard in creating your new program, and looks like you're going to be there for a bit longer. Okay, so now we've got a minute on maybe the not so glossy side. Drew, tell us about, maybe just give, because we will explore this more in the interview, but maybe just give us a hint of what some of the areas that we might go into. Ready?
Yep.
Okay, off you go.
Well, like I alluded to a little bit after you read the bio, is that in between the software company and being published, I was homeless twice. Certain parts before even launching the software company, I worked for 18 months without any pay behind the computer, 18 months developing that software. After I was published, I became homeless, which was very frustrating and mind-blowing for me. And, you know, I struggled a lot with relating to people and social stuff as a child. I was bullied and made fun of and teased a lot. And I've faced a lot of uphill battles being very young, teaching what I'm teaching, doing what I'm doing, and also looking really young as well. So there's been a lot of challenges that I've had to face, and I have a certain there's a certain not normalness that you need to have in order to persist over decades in the face of continual failure and rejection. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges and sacrifices that have been made in order to create and achieve all of those glossy things.
Okay. That little minute really hit me hard, Drew. Hearing about you being made homeless despite being a successful and published kind of author and developing a software company, and even more when you told us about how you're different and how at school when you were young you were bullied. So is it okay if we just take a breath just with that, just to acknowledge that? So let's go and start at the beginning a bit. So you mentioned in your bio you started when you were 14, but just then you kind of spoke of a really vulnerable Drew who was different at school and maybe bullied. So maybe take us back to that period in your life, maybe before you were 14, when you were young, choose a point in your childhood, and tell us about Drew when he was a little boy and what his life was like, maybe what some of the challenges were that he faced.
Yeah, so a lot of things stem around the fact that when I was really young, 4, 5, 6, 7, I had warts on my hand. I had, I was going to say a handful of warts, but that's quite literal. Yeah, I had a handful of warts on my hands. That's me. So I had a handful of warts, and the kids at school bullied me and teased me for it. And at that time, I chose to be a victim. I chose to take it personally, make it mean something about me, and just poor me, right? Being victimhood about it. Of course, at the time, I didn't realize it was a choice. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. But I suffered a lot for many years. I have a father who's a non-biological father, and we moved from where I was born in California to New York. I started school at 6 years old. So already I felt like I was entering into a place where these kids, maybe their parents knew each other, and I was going to a small town where people knew everybody already, and I had warts. So there was already this feeling of being not from the area, being different, people being afraid of me, rejecting me. And so that was profound trauma. We can look back as adults and say, oh, it was just bumps on your finger, big whoop-de-doo, okay. And I can see that now. Yet, when I'm 6 years old and I don't have that awareness, it was a really big deal to me. For many, many years, it was very traumatic. I was bullied and teased. And then that reputation passed on from year to year. And then after we got rid of my warts, they were lasered off. That insecurity that I had stayed, and that reputation stayed. And for the next decade, essentially, in school in America, public school, there was a lot of suffering that I had. I would sit alone in lunch. I was the freak that loved assigned seats because it forced people to sit next to me. had, I was picked last in gym, literally picked last in gym class. Sometimes I wasn't even picked. Sometimes it was, okay, you're the 3 leftover freaks, losers, whatever the hell, just go onto this team. The coach just say, okay. So these things that you see in like Revenge of the Nerds or these Hollywood 80s, 90s teen flicks was my actual real life. And it sucked. There's no way around it that, I was to the point to where I was suicidal. I was depressed, 16 years old, crying myself to sleep because I wasn't invited out. I really was in this victimhood mentality and poor me and years and years and years of that. And I had no other reference point. I had no other way. Nobody else showed me a way of what could be different. They just said, oh, get over it, or whatever the hell it was. And so, that of course led me struggling with girls, right? I'm a teenager, right? Hormones starting to come in, all this stuff. And so I was, facing sexual and romantic rejection. And so that environment of not having many friends, I had a couple friends, and those couple friends were also people that only had a couple friends, which were me. I remember sitting in lunch, and I sat, at the table with, the people that I didn't even really would want to sit with, right? Maybe they were unhygienic or whatever, they're eating their boogers, eating glue, this sort of stuff. And, it's just, all right, we're a bunch of misfits, right? Like the Breakfast Club, or, so all of these things that we see in Hollywood, that was the real life for me. And it was never glamorous or any of that stuff. So by the time I got to 14, that's high school in the States, because of, maybe I was just a nerd at heart, and of the lack of social ability or opportunities, I was drawn towards video games, to computers, to technology. And so at 14, like I said on my bio, I started learning web design, graphics. I was into anime, like Dragon Ball Z, these kind of things. And I got made fun of that at school, right? I was into Pokemon, right? Like all this old stuff. That now it's cool, right? Like now I hear like hot cheerleaders in middle school and high school are learning how to code. I mean, like if you would have told the 13-year-old version of me that in 2020 there's hot cheerleaders learning how to code and are building their own websites, I mean, I would have like, it would have been heaven. I mean, I wouldn't have believed you. It would have been Indians in the 1700s, and you telling them, we have phones that can see faces from across the world. I mean, it's like crazy. And even now, right, we have whole programs and movements around bullying. Like my little brother at school, he's just graduating high school. People aren't bullying like they did before. Like if you're a bully, people don't like you. Like you're not like cool. When I was a kid, the bullies were the cool people. So I mean, it's great. Like I love that that's progressing like that. It's just mind blowing, from that perspective. So when I was that age, I was, and there's also a lot of weird stuff too that's going on. You see 13-year-old girls on Instagram that are half naked. 13-year-old girls, when I was a kid, I mean, they had thick glasses and ponytails and were playing with frogs or dolls or what. So that's also a very interesting, transition that's happening. along with my story,
Yeah.
so I started getting into web design and development, and because I didn't have much of a social life, I spent a lot of time on the computer. And so I was learning how to code. I was learning how to do design. I would study stuff, English class, pick your book. I brought in a programming book, and the teacher looked at me like I was bonkers. So through that whole process, I started learning technology, coding, building computers, all of this geeky, nerdy stuff that later on in my life, I'm now using to, have a successful business and brand and all of this stuff. Help my clients, right? The technology I use in my therapy practice is advanced video cinematic technology that if I wasn't geeky and nerdy back then and learned how to use all that equipment, I wouldn't be able to do what I do now. So in retrospect, I share all of this knowing how it all has led me to where I'm at. But back then when I was in it, it fucking sucked. If I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, you're allowed to say it. And it sounds like it. And I love the way that you described it as like a Hollywood movie. And we are all familiar with the kind of the high school movies where there's a bully and there's, the outsiders. It's Stranger Things all over, isn't it?
Yeah. D&D. I play D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, my heart really goes out to that, Drew. That younger version of you, and as a school teacher, as a high school teacher, I see that, and well, you're right. It doesn't exist in the way now that it did then, because teachers, probably like me, will create a space where that can't happen, or that doesn't happen so much, whereas before that wasn't the emphasis. Okay, so that's quite in fact, like we need to take a breath with that little Drew right now, sitting in the cafeteria by himself, or on a sports team where no one's picking him, or in a science room and no one wants to sit next to him. I just want to like send a bit of love out to him. Let's do that.
Great.
So there's so many questions I want to ask around this kind of area, but firstly, just quickly, you've told us about your life in school. What was happening in your family life back then? Tell us just very quickly about that side of your life.
Sure. That's cool. Yeah, I like to talk about that. It's not usually something that comes up that I share a lot. So, well, I want to preface with behind anything that has happened in my family and the problems or issues, I am extremely grateful to have parents in a family structure unit that loved me and supported me and cared about me. They may not have always understood me. I may not have always related or fit in. I may not have always been blood, but I've always been treated like family. I've always felt the love. I've been listened to. So there's a lot of things that I'm very grateful for. I'm very blessed about that. I see that not everybody has been blessed with that. I never, my awareness, any massive amount of sexual abuse, massive amount of major physical abuse. So with that being said, there was a lot of chaos and drama at home. I was not an easy child to be with. I was really fucking smart. I had a very, very high IQ. They had a lot of struggles with me. They took me to psychologists and doctors. What's going on here? Like I had issues, major issues with authority. So these sort of things that didn't serve me well to fit in with a system and with a father that was very traditional. I'm the man of the house. This is my roof, my rules because I say so. I don't need to explain anything to you. All this sort of stuff. I butted heads with that tremendously. an alpha child that didn't have any right to be in, like that in a family that was very top down. I struggled a lot with that. My parents were very young parents. My biological parents had me when when they were 17, so still in high school. I was unexpected. I was one of my mom's first experiences, that I came from one of her first experiences being born. My mom's father disowned her. So there's a lot of, it's like my biological father, there was abuse there and there was court orders. So there was already a lot of instability and drama, and uncertainty and all of this stuff when I was a baby, when I was an infant. My stepfather came into the picture and moved us away from all of that into the country in upstate New York, which I am, in hindsight, incredibly blessed and grateful for, that I was able to move out of the ghetto-ish area in California and into a country values, right? Learning the values of, a handshake is your word. You do good to people, you work hard. So I learned a lot of those small town, old fashioned values and ethics through that. And I was also butting head with them a lot, right? Why should I do that? That doesn't make any sense to me. And it never took the time to explain it. And even if they did, my intelligence was just so intense. I would, I wasn't a controllable child. I was very defiant. And at that time for them, they didn't like that. As an adult now, some of those serve me in the world, right? Those have allowed me to see beyond manipulations and propagandas of institutions, of governments, and I'm able to think for myself. So that stuff as a child, which caused a lot of drama and struggle in my family unit, has also turned into something that as an adult, now in proper maturity and relationship and not having to, fight the man and, all this sort of stuff, now in proper relationship, that has served me very well. And I'm very grateful for that. So there was a lot of that stress and drama going on. There was stress between my parents, often around money, right? We were very low middle class kind of family, paycheck to paycheck. Everything was always, we always had food. We always had a Christmas and birthdays. Very blessed and grateful for that. But we didn't go on cruises. We didn't do big trips. We didn't, they didn't buy me a car, So it was that sort of situation. And there was a lot of stress and drama around money. Lots of fighting and yelling and lots of chaos around that. My sister was born when I was 12. And so that changed things. And then my brother when I was 15. As I've gotten older and as everybody's gotten older, things have improved a lot as I've done a lot of my self-development work. It's been cool to see my family benefiting from that and being influenced by that, and them growing and getting healthy and doing that sort of stuff. So that's kind of been the childhood. With school, I struggled a lot in school in itself, beyond just the social circumstances. I was one of those kids that refused to do homework after, I don't know, I think about 5th grade. I was one of those kids that loved learning. I actually wanted to learn more than pretty much everybody else. So I paid attention in class. I would ace the tests, but I would reject the homework. I despise the homework because I'm in class for 6 hours a day. I want to go home and play. And so I really fought against that. I could have had grades, 4 GPA, high Harvard, whatever the fuck, but that's not what I wanted. The system, I didn't fit into the system. I didn't think the same way as the system. I questioned the system. The system doesn't like any of those 3 things.
It really doesn't.
Yeah, and so you can already start to see certain themes here, certain things that have troubled me in certain ways when they were out of relationship. They weren't nurtured and supported in a proper way, and I had to just fight and figure them out myself.
Sure.
Um,
Sounds like little Drew had a real battle on his hands and everyone around him.
yeah.
Well, thank you for being so honest and frank about that. And again, my heart goes out to little Drew and your mother and your stepfather and everyone around you, and probably your teachers as well.
Yeah, they sure had hell too.
So one of the things I love to do is to hear about the people that inspire you. Now, I've heard a lot about the struggles that little Drew had or young Drew had. Tell me about some of the people that inspired them. Now, normally there's at least one teacher that you have at school who you kind of have a special bond with. So it could be someone in school, but it might be someone outside of school. It's possible that there is no one at all. But tell me, like, who was it that maybe not a traditional teacher, but is there someone who you had a special relationship who really looked out for you, who cared for you, or really taught you something that you would like to bring in here?
As I was a teenager, not so much. That's kind of why I turned to the computer and then the internet. I read a lot, so I found a lot of solace in books, young adult books. I looked up to Star Wars, Indiana Jones, these sort of things. As far as like having that one mentor teacher in school, I was blessed to have, some teachers that, not all of them, definitely not all of them, but there were definitely teachers that were really good teachers, cared about teaching, that I'm grateful for, that helped me along. And I've had certain teachers that recognizes gifts or whatever, and some of them encouraged them, and other ones didn't see them. As an adult, as I think about it, there's not just like that one that comes to mind that was my guiding light throughout my childhood or whatever. I was really close with my granny as a little kid, as like a young, like under 6 years old.
Okay, well, let's bring
she
her.
really
Tell us about your granny and why she was special and what she gave you.
Love. I mean, she was raising me while my mom was still in school, and she's just been a source of sweetness and unconditional love, and she's certain financial support sometimes, certain housing support sometimes, certain emotional support sometimes. It's she's just been a source of unconditional love, and probably one of the people that I have the most closest relations to in the family, just simply as childhood. She's not doing well now. She's probably going to be passing in the next year. She's very sick. But yeah, I think that would be probably the one person in my family that has probably given me the most attention and love and unconditionality from that feminine, that feminine energy.
Yeah. Sweetness and unconditional love.
Yeah.
Is she still with us? What's her name, Drew?
Granny of Virginia.
Granny Virginia. Yeah, and the most profound mentors that we have aren't something that teach us that we can verbalize it. It is just that experience of unconditional and sweet love. So let's just give her a breath, shall we, and just acknowledge and bring her.
Yeah, she needs a really deep breath. Yeah. She's on oxygen tubes and everything, so we can send her some deep breath.
Let's do that then. Thank you for bringing her in. One of the things that I've noticed with the truly greatest teachers is that they are able to transform their own suffering into their own gifts that they bring out into the world. So their journey of healing becomes not just their own healing, but the healing of others as well. And throughout your talking about your childhood in school and at home, I was really aware of now as an adult, you are able to use those experiences and the suffering that you had that has enabled you to go out and to help transform and heal and help other people feel as well. And so that for me is one of the markers of the truly greatest teachers, who have the kind of the love and the compassion for themselves at that young age, and then have managed to transmute, almost like alchemy, that into the most amazing gold. So I just want to really acknowledge that you have that ability to do that, Drew, and that those experiences, that fires that you've been to, have tempered you into where you are now. So that's pretty amazing. Where do I want to go? All right, just quickly then, if you could go back to that teenage Drew, what would you say to him now? What advice would you give him? What would you say to him?
And something along the lines of, the phrase, "This too shall pass." I mean, I was suicidal, I suicidal and probably near homicide. I fantasized about killing myself and shooting up the school. And if I wasn't as much of a chicken shit as I was and afraid of hurting and pain and all that stuff, I probably would have done it. I had a lot of anger, and a lot of hatred and self-hatred. So, the biggest thing is, just, this isn't you, this isn't your whole life. This is just something that sucks beyond all belief, that at some level you've chosen to go through in order to learn what you've had to learn. And this is probably the easiest way for you to learn what you needed to learn. So if you can imagine, this is the easiest way possible for you to have learned the lesson and have grown at a spiritual level, just, hang in there. So that would probably be the biggest thing, because I wouldn't want to go back and give advice that would change the course. I've watched too many sci-fi movies about time travel. But yeah, I mean, if I could go back and be me now, then, I mean, things would be dramatically different. I mean, knowing what I know now back then, I mean, just the simple fact of when I had warts and just changing my whole perspective on that, I could have skipped a decade of suffering just by that one thing. And I don't know if that would have made me a better person or not better person, right? I don't know if maybe by suffering less, I could have shined brighter, or I don't know, and I don't want to speculate on that. But if I were to go back now, there's a lot of, I had to like cheat the system, right? Like, oh no, I know this already. I know what's going to happen. So, like, don't take this personally, right? How do you talk to people? How do you socialize with people? How do you talk to girls? How do you, get through school? How do you do this stuff without all of the suffering? I chose to suffer a lot, and there's a part of me that wanted people to feel sorry for me. It's one of the reasons why I don't talk a lot about my story anymore. I don't use it. I don't really focus a lot about it anymore, because there was that part of me as a child that used that for attention and negative attention and suffering, which was just a bunch of bullshit. But at the time, that's how I knew how to get love, right? That's what felt like love to me. If I can get attention by, being bullied, but I couldn't get attention by just going through life functional. No, that's the shit we do. So,
yeah, I understand that. And I love that advice. Hang in there. This too shall pass. Yeah, that's great advice for everything, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that saying that, like, sorry, I'm sweating. I got Tuscan sun shining in on me. It's like really warm over here. And what's that phrase too, right? Like, if this is the end, like,
everything will be all right in the end.
Yeah, and if it's not all right, it's not the end.
Yeah. And also, I hear you about, you don't talk about your story much because you don't, whereas before you might have used it as a kind of pity, kind of feeling sorry. But also, Drew, it's an inspiring story. When other people are going through difficult times or have had a shitty childhood with a lot of anger and conflict, to be able to see someone who has not just survived that, but managed to thrive and transform that into something amazing is really inspiring. And that's why I do these interviews, and that's why I wanted to interview you, because I didn't know that part of your story, but I knew I had a feeling something like that was in there.
And I forget that too, right? Like, and sometimes I don't know if it's arrogant or what, but I mean, as I moved through all that stuff, and in my mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, people I would just meet new people, right? Their impression of me was like I was the fucking popular cool kid in school, like I was doing all this stuff, like I mean, like all of these things that after a decade or plus of doing the work, it actually had a real effect. And it was really, I remember there's been a couple times where like I would go to like geeky places, like a game store, or stuff like this, and then you have the traditional, what stereotype we would consider a nerd, right? Whatever that would be, and I see that person as like me, right? Like I relate to that person. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I can talk about Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and coding and programming and, PHP, all these, nerdy things. And they look at me like I'm the jock. Like I'm like, they see me as the bad guy, that gets all the women, that's the athlete that makes fun of them. And I can see the look. I've seen the look in their eye as they look at me like that, because I had that same look when I looked at the jocks and the fucking cool guys that took the girls that I liked. And this was 20s, and it was the weirdest fucking thing. Like on one side, I was flattered, right? Like me, it was like, oh man, I must be fucking cool now, right? Like I must have done something that worked. But on the other hand, it was really sad, because I'm like, no, like I'm more like you, like, I want to be your friend, like I'd protect you against those, fucking kind of people that would bully you. And so it was this weird time where it's like, it was this weird phase, and sometimes it still happens where, I don't feel like I fit in with the jocks and the millionaires or whatever the fuck it is, the yacht club, even though I was like with my mentor on his yacht at the yacht club. And it still felt like, oh, this is interesting. It wasn't like I didn't belong, but it was just like, oh, yeah, I don't, my mommy didn't pay for my Yale education, so whatever the hit is, and what I'm saying now may reflect my judgments and bullshit from a child, the stereotypes. But the point in sharing that is I want to illustrate this. I want to share that mindset that I had then of how I saw the world that didn't serve me. But it's still, it's like I didn't fit into that world. And the world that I thought I came from and I was a part of, it was like they didn't want me either because they thought I was from over. So I know none of that's real. That's a story, right? Like that's in my head. But that's still the stuff that played out as I was going through this process. That's still the stuff that affected me in a certain way, where it's like, wow, even though I've done this work to overcome all of these challenges and struggles. Yeah, it's like a perfect example is like you're the indie band that started in the garage. It came from fucking nothing, and then you actually make it to MTV first slot, right? Top 10 Billboard charts, and now all of the fucking garage band just think you're a sellout, and you can't hang out with them because they think you're a pop star now. So it's all it's all story stuff, but it's stuff that we go through, and it's funny to witness and see how the ego identifies with things, and it's funny what we do in our culture.
It's a roller coaster. It really is. Okay. Well, listen, there's so much to talk about here. We're almost at the top of our hour. So what I would like to do, I think, if this is okay by you, we'll just do a little bit more of your life. And then maybe we'll call it a day, and perhaps later on you'll come back for part 2 and we can hear the rest of your story. How does that sound?
Yeah, well, we can, sure. Yeah. And that could be an opportunity if anybody has any questions, Q&A, sort of stuff. Yeah, great.
Exactly. Okay, so let's kind of move on from school a little bit. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, you started coding really young at 14, and then at 18 you started a software company. So
Yes.
Tell us about starting a software company and how that took off, and then to becoming homeless. Because there's another big story here that can go on. Success really young and then becoming homeless. Tell us about that part of your life.
Sure. So, like I said, when I was young, I was really into coding and design because of the circumstances, and it interested me. We're getting some sunlight. You're gonna lose my face into the whiteness. Don't go into the light. So basically, long story short of the software company, because I am not sure everybody wants to hear about the actual coding the software. But yeah, that was my first entryway into entrepreneurship. So I got a job at a newspaper, and while I was there, I was building my own design portfolio website. And during that process, I needed a special effect, and there's no way to do it. So I decided to figure it out myself. So I started to learn as I went how to build the software. And then within a few months of doing that, they laid me off of my job. I was in the probation period. I was the youngest person they ever hired, 18-year-old person, at this newspaper. So I then was blessed enough to have a home with my grandparents in California, because after graduating high school, where I grew up, I didn't want to then spend my career time with all of the people that didn't like me and I didn't have good relationships with. So I said, okay, bye-bye, and then moved all the way back to California. And so moved from all the way to start fresh, to start new, maybe running away, maybe to start something new, whatever. So I started this working on the software, and it took me 18 months, and I didn't have anybody in my family. I didn't have anybody that I knew that was an entrepreneur, that started their own business, that did anything. Everything that I was trying to do was brand new to me. It was, nobody inspired me to be an entrepreneur. I had no role models. I had jack shit, nothing except an idea and a passion and a problem to solve. And so I spent 18 months coding the physics and particle engine. I spent the time writing all of the documentation. I spent the time creating the user interface, the website, the licensing platform, the algorithms, the formulas, the tutorials, the marketing, the copy, everything, partnership with Adobe, all of this stuff. That was just creating the software. Then I also had to learn all the business stuff, right? Okay, so, and that was 2005, 2006. That was still early internet, right? There was still, people still didn't think you could have an online business. I mean, it was enough, right? You had people doing it, but the average person, my family, so I spent 18 months and I wrote the software. I created this, the number one, program in my industry. And the whole time, my parents, grandparents, like, oh, the grocery store's hiring. Oh, McDonald's is hiring. Oh, when are you going to get a real job? In the real world, people need real jobs. Oh my God. Okay. And then, so I launched the software, and then I was 18 years old, at that time, 19 years old. And, making $5,000 a month in passive income. I mean, now maybe it doesn't sound too impressive to people. We've heard all this stuff. Okay. But in 2006, as an 18-year-old from software, from middle of nowhere town with family and no resources and bootstrapping it, no funding, all this himself, it was a big accomplishment, for me. I mean, it was, nobody in my family did a business. Everybody had labor jobs. So there was a lot of tension in that, just dynamic of, I'm going to start a software company. Like I said, now hearing it, people started software companies with their grandmas and their dog, but at the time it was not as accepted. I got made fun of for coding, like being a program person was not cool like it is now. So there was a lot of stigma. I think that's a good word. There's a lot of stigma and dogma around breaking through that. But I did it. I ran the software company for 7 years. I then created a second version of the program. Through that course, I contributed open source libraries. It was used on websites of Walmart, Samsung, video games, BT, National Science. I mean, all these people, they used, this stuff. And it was like, because those people were other coders, right? The people that did that, there were other nerds like me, right? So once my dad saw that, because he was the one that's like, get a real job. Once they actually saw that I could provide for myself for years, and not be going to a 9-to-5 job, they kind of stopped, they kind of stopped bothering me about that. So that was a big thing at that time for me. It was a big kind of like, what I'm doing is real. There's something here that's true, and that I had no context for it. My family and culture had no context for it. So I was in that way blazing trail too. So that was challenging, not having mentors, not having, I did it the long, hard way, but that's all I knew. I went from nothing. And so to me, it's something I'm very proud of, and allowed me to, it allowed a whole new world, right? It showed me, look, I can work for myself. Like this entrepreneurship concept, it fit really well with my personality of not being a fan of the school system and all this sort of stuff. So So that was, again, a lot of time on the computer. You know, it sounds cool and exciting. I had, 3,000 people using it, these clients, whatever. I wasn't, I didn't become a millionaire or anything from it. I probably could have, but I had my stories, I had my mythologies, I had, my limitations, and I did the best with what I could, but I had my shit too that probably limited me from going further. And then what happened is that the whole industry took a dump. And so the software that I had relied on one technology, and that technology went bye-bye. And then so within a year, I went from making $5,000 a month from the software and having a lot of activity to no future at all in my whole business had no future, to then not making money. So during this time of starting the software company, maybe about 3 years in, I was learning personal development stuff. That's when I got my training in NLP, all this stuff. So there was also part of me during this time that also wanted to transition out of it. Was like, I learned all of this healing stuff, the psychology stuff, this therapy stuff, spirituality stuff, holistic health stuff. And my heart and soul was pulling me into that direction. I was lit up a lot more about all of those things that changed my life, that completely transformed my life, than I was about coding as I did before. So during that time, I started writing. I started that blog, and then during that process of transitioning between the software company to being published was the first time that I was homeless, and the business was dropping because of the technology and industry, and I was learning how to start new in a new world. So that's that in a nutshell. You're muted.
Yeah, what a great, what a turnaround from that kid who was in school, with not any support or real mentors, to kind of be able to bootstrap themselves without any particular mentors into starting a software development company. That's a big thing. It's a big thing at any age, but especially when you're 18, and maybe the trials that you've gone through before helped you for that. And then discovering the other side, and we're leading into your first period of where it came down. Maybe not crashing down, but it just came down at some point. And you've mentioned that there weren't any mentors or role models. Is there anyone that you would like to bring in that stage, the Drew of 18, 19, 20, 21, who's started a successful software company, also starting to reach out in alternative directions? Is there anyone else who really had a big influence on you at that point, that you would like to bring in here?
There's a couple. I mean, as a teenager and in the design world, there were people that inspired me about that. In the alternative, when I have trouble with that question, because there's a lot of things at that time. It was a brand new world for me, so everything was amazing. Like, oh my god, this is like you could say green juice, and that blew my fucking mind. This was still back in the day. Nobody was really doing green juice. I remember this guy had a blog, Steve Pavlina, who talked about raw food diet. And I read that for the first time, and I'm like, this is the most insane thing I've ever heard of. But it was also interesting. And that started me, I was like, okay, well, maybe let me try being vegetarian. And that just was the beginning. It planted a seed. And then I had my NLP trainer, which was a huge influence, right? That probably that was the thing that got me into therapy, into healing, and actually being somebody who wanted to do that, learning that stuff because of the effect, that it had with me. But at that time, somebody who actually would be like a mentor. No, I mean, I think, maybe my trainer would have been closest, my friends around that time, around that stuff, getting into that world. Sure. So, yeah. So there's some, right? Even books, even ideas, and I think more of anything, it was the ideas and concepts that just that period between, I would say, 18 and, I don't know, 24 was just that was me waking up out of the matrix. That whole time period, everything I learned, I soaked up everything, and it really, so yeah, okay. So in that, I would just like to call in all of the shoulders of giants that I stand on, right? All of the people and the books and all the people that blazed the trail ahead of me in their own way, that have their teachings or influence have allowed me to be where I'm at and do what I do. Yeah, I'd like to thank them for that. Everybody who's against whatever odds, or no odds, that have just contributed to the world, and to my life from what they taught and what they shared. I couldn't have done it without them. So I'd like to thank all those. I like to bring in all those people that I was able to learn from during that period, that really was the only way of me be able to wake up.
Okay, well, let's
short answer long. Yeah.
And let's just take it. And is there any names or any books or anything that even if there's like a few that you'd just like to call in here?
No, just in general. Yeah.
Let's do that. And that's for everyone. Everyone's got their giants whose shoulders that they stand on. So I love that. I really like to just I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing that, Andrew.
Took me a couple minutes to get there, but I think we got to a good. I think we got to a good place.
Okay, well, I'm just going to very quickly. Can you just? I want to leave this interview on a cliffhanger.
Oh.
And always a cliffhanger works best if there's some tragedy and there's some danger ending. So maybe just give us a brief taste of what being homeless was like after a very successful late teenagers and early 20 years. Just briefly, tell us about that period, and then we'll wrap it up for part one.
Well, it's not as romantic as they like to think you like you to think it is. There was some romantic aspects. Oh, cool! Like I can live anywhere, right? I can be a nomad, right? I read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. I went backpacking for 6 months in Europe and Asia. I went to do a talk in London, in England, Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, Shanghai, San Francisco, New York City, Istanbul, Turkey. Then I got back, and there was a few years where I was sleeping on couches, sleeping in my car, and then when it got to be real homelessness, when I was like, okay, I have, yeah, there was a really rough time when I was homeless. There was some fun times, but yeah, there was a really rough, the second time I was homeless was the worst. The first time was a bit more romantic. It was like, yeah, fuck the system. Like, no, I'll be a nomad. I can sleep from my car. It's only temporary. I'm in Southern California. This whole excuse me, this whole mythology. The second time I was homeless, yeah, man, it sucked. Like, just things of like, where do you go to the bathroom? How do you go to the bathroom? Where do you shower? What are places where you can shower? I remember there were times where there's this, I mean, the amount of embarrassment and humiliation of going into a grocery store, you know, not showering, just cleaning up in their bathroom in the morning after you slept in their parking lot. And then you go to buy cereal, you know, almond milk and, you know, bananas, and you stop up the line because you can't afford the $7. You have to go onto your, I need to go onto my phone and my phone, right? Like, okay, go onto my phone to transfer, you know, cents from my PayPal account to my other bank account. In line, I had to say, okay, stop. I have to go over here. Caused, you know, drama. They had to stop the thing. The line, people lined up, looking at me. I mean, that sucked. Just the regular hygiene, everyday kind of stuff, like, you know, and then sleeping. I had to find places where I could sleep without being seen or bothered. Times the police, it's 3 a.m, they come bang the door of my car. I'm just sleeping. I'm just trying to sleep. I'm not causing any problems. I'm just sleeping in a street, an industrial area, away from everything. They come and knock the door. They question me. They accuse me of prostitution and put me in the back of a police car. I'm like, dazed, confused, horrified, terrified, shaking, trembling, 3 a.m. All I want to do is sleep, wake up in the morning, go to the library to work on my business. Yeah, so that's a little glimpse into, you know, being homeless.
Wow. Now there's a place to leave it hanging, Drew. There's a little place to keep people coming back for part 2. So to finish up with, one of the questions I like to ask people is, because I like to find out what inspired people, and what they would like to inspire in others as well. But I don't feel quite ready for that bit yet, because I want to give the end of the story before I ask what really, you know, what you really want to inspire in people now. But what would that, Drew, what would his legacy, what did he want to be leaving behind? What did he want? What was his dreams and his aspirations at that point?
Yeah, at that point, yeah, there was freedom is a big part of it. And back then I took it to an extreme. You know, it was freedom with rejection of structure and authority and all of this stuff. Now I have freedom in the context of all that stuff, which is a lot more functional. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my childhood. Maybe my childhood was because of this. But I have a real strong resonance with the hero's journey. You know, with you know, the rebellion, right? You know, it feels like my childhood fighting, you know, this in the world right now. I look at certain systems in the world where I feel the same way. I see my friends around me losing their jobs or going to jail or being attacked because they're helping people, they're helping heal people, and they're being condemned and made bad guys and their lives ruined because they just found a way outside of the box to help a lot of people. So, you know, I was waking up to a lot of stuff at that time about spirituality, the systems, real history, the Matrix sort of stuff, conspiracy stuff. That was a lot of stuff going on at that time for me in my journey. And I don't encourage a lot of insane conspiracy stuff now. And at the time, realizing that what we've been told, a lot of it isn't really what's the truth of what's going on, and seeing it from my eyes firsthand. That really was passionate for me. I was really waking up to, hey, this isn't cool. Like, how come people don't see this? Like, how come I can see that that's a bunch of bullshit and everybody's just eating it up? So during that time for me, it was really about freedom and truth and empowerment. And these are a lot of the things that I still teach and are still core values to me. At that time for me, though, I was still fueled by hurt and pain and anger and victimhood that I was just learning about, that I was just starting to move through and really have that unconscious stuff wake up to. So, empowerment, truth, freedom.
Freedom, truth, and empowerment.
Yeah.
That sounds like the founding concepts for a new nation state or a new way of being. Let's have a breath with those three things. Maybe two more, one for each. So, Drew, we're going to leave it there for today. We're going to leave it for you in your car, being hassled by the police, working on a business in the library, in your line-up for the grocery store, trying to wash yourself and then transfer cents between different accounts. And we're going to find out next time how you stepped away from that into the path that you're on now.
Yeah.
You're happy to come back, I hope.
Yeah. I don't want to leave it there. To be continued.
To be continued. Well, thank you very much, Drew, and we shall see you again on Inspiring People, Conversations About Breath very shortly.
Thank you, Benedict. I appreciate you having me on. I admire what you're doing here, inspiring people. Thank you for the, even though I'm not a breathwork facilitator, thank you for seeing some value that could be here, and just the mutual appreciation for both of our stories and both of our paths that I know are similar in certain ways. So thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing here, and it's always a pleasure. It's always fun and always an honor. So thank you.
Always it is. Thank you, Drew.